All right, everybody. In the interest of time, I'm sure there'll be some more people filing in, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I am Jarrett Burton. I'm the coordinator for the DuPage Recovery-Oriented System of Care, and welcome to the February edition of the ROSC presentation series. Today we're going to be presenting on nitrous oxide, and we'll get started with that very shortly. I do want to promote a few things first, and then we'll go ahead and get started with that. So hang on one second. Let me share my screen. All right. Just some upcoming meetings and trainings and all that type of good stuff. So next month, the actual ROSC Council meeting, which is back on its normal second Wednesday, so no holidays in March. So we'll be back Wednesday, March 12th at 3 p.m. Our friends from RCA in St. Charles are going to be reporting on all of the services that they provide out there, which there's a ton if you're unaware. And then we'll also be going over some of the results of our recent ROSC community survey. So that should be a really, really good meeting. Hope you can join us either in person at Serenity or on Zoom in March. Let's see, if Blake's here. Blake's going to be presenting for us next month. This is the holding pattern title I put in. He's going to have something probably much wittier than this. So we'll put that on there. But Blake, do you want to come off mute for a second and maybe mention why this particular topic is something that is worth being presented on next month?
Yeah, so ibogaine is something that I first became aware of maybe 20 years ago, and it's one of the areas within addiction medicine that I don't think has gotten quite the spotlight that a lot of the other measures have. And there is a lot of current research being done on derivatives of it that are safer, have a higher efficacy, but the history of it and the biochemical pathways of it are both fascinating and they have a remarkably high success rate with it. So I think it's something that the community should be more aware of.
Absolutely. So yeah, so that's those presentation series meetings like today. They're usually on the third Wednesday of every month. So those are on Zoom only, so we hope you can join us. If you've got a topic that you're particularly passionate about or you think that more people need to learn about, you can always submit ideas for presentations. And we'll also hopefully next month be talking about some new ways that you can access a lot of the presentations that we've done previously moving forward. So we'll talk about that in March. Just a few meetings, a few of SMART recovery meetings I want to talk about first. We do have a virtual SMART recovery meeting on Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're unfamiliar with SMART, it is kind of originally created as an alternative to 12-step. For some folks who may balk at some of the spirituality aspects of 12-step, SMART is a great alternative. So a lot of CBT, goal-based recovery program. And we do a virtual one Saturday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Those are always open. You can join us at that. We also run one over at Stony Brook Center in Wheaton. So Stony Brook Center, really great MAC clinic. So they do methadone, Suboxone, other forms of medication-assisted recovery. So we do that SMART meeting over there every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. We also do a SMART recovery meeting for friends and family. So friends and family sometimes are the forgotten folks, right? We got people in recovery themselves, but oftentimes the family who's attached to that person has gone through their own traumatic experiences and sometimes could use a little bit extra support. So we do a SMART recovery meeting where they are more than welcome to join us and talk about how this is affecting them as opposed to just the person who's going through treatment. Speaking of families, we also do a Connection Through Loss grief group. So this is on the second and fourth Thursday of every month. And those are open. So those are here at Serenity House, the second and fourth Thursday. A couple more things. We also do a hybrid veteran support group. Again, I mentioned sometimes the forgotten people. Veterans is one of those groups that really can always use some extra help. So we do a hybrid veteran support group on Thursdays, 6:30 to 7:30. So you can either join us on Zoom or in person at Serenity House. And last but not least, on the meetings, we also do a virtual refuge recovery meeting on Saturdays. If you're unfamiliar with refuge, it is kind of a Buddhist-based, Eastern spirituality-based recovery program. So there's quite a bit of meditation. There's a lot of mindfulness, and there's also some recovery steps that are based around some of the core tenets of Buddhism. So if that's something that sounds interesting, it's a great alternative. Some of our folks who have attended these meetings have had some great success with it. So more than welcome to join us for those. So I'm going to stop this particular share, and then I'm going to reshare. 1 second here. Okay. All right. If everybody could see that, could I get a thumbs up? I got a thumbs up. Let's go ahead and get started. So, why nitrous oxide? I did a presentation last year that was kind of a catch-all presentation on substances that we were finding in vape shops. You can find a vape shop, it seems like, on every block out here in the suburbs these days, and it obviously is selling more than just vape and vape adjacent materials. We oftentimes find stuff like Kratom being sold there, Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10 through 12. I'm not sure how far up the deltas are at this point, but a lot of those. And one of the other things that we were just starting to see when I was doing that presentation, beyond T and Neptune, which is another just incredibly dangerous substance that gets sold in there, is nitrous oxide. So I touched on it very, very briefly in that presentation, but there's been enough happening over the past few months to kind of go back and do a deeper dive into it because there is a lot of interesting stuff about nitrous, and it's been kind of in the news and in social media and very, very trendy thing, and we'll get into that too. So that's kind of why nitrous, and let's kind of get into it. You can show hands if you want, but if you have been on nitrous before, there's obviously some different ways you may have ingested nitrous. So I think kind of the most common are for either dental or medical purposes. Those are kind of the licit versions of using nitrous oxide, but there's obviously also the illicit versions. But chances are, if you've used nitrous, it's either been either at the dentist or because of some kind of medical procedure that you've needed anesthesia for. However, the illicit forms, which are still illicit because they can get sold at a vape shop, you may have heard of galaxy gas. So we're going to talk specifically about that a little bit later. Galaxy gas is not kind of a generic term for the nitrous that we're finding in vape shops. It's actually a specific brand. But we are kind of hearing galaxy gas being used for all these types of nitrous that are sold in the shops, but chances are that's what you've heard of lately. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of nitrous because it is fascinating. And then after we get through the history, obviously we're going to get into what this stuff does to the brain and the body because it has several key effects on both. We're going to talk about its kind of more recent rise in popularity, usually kind of due to the social media trends, which we're going to touch on too. But then also, how are we treating this? What are some kind of treatment modalities, treatment options? And then also, how can we do some proper prevention work for this particular substance and more as they come up and start being sold through vape shops? So just kind of the 101. What is nitrous oxide? So nitrous oxide is a colorless, non-flammable gas that kind of has a sweet odor. You may see it written, and then here I kind of use it as shorthand so I don't have to type out nitrous oxide every time, but you may see it as N2O. That is kind of the chemical designation for it. You probably have heard it referred to as laughing gas due to its euphoric effects when inhaled. That's kind of how I knew it as growing up. When I would hear people refer to nitrous oxide, it was almost always laughing gas, but also whippets, and we'll get into that too. There's obviously legitimate uses, as we talked about anesthesia, pain relief during dental procedures, but also industrial. So it's used as a propellant in whipped cream dispensers, kind of those more professional type whipped cream canisters. You may see them used at like a Starbucks or any type of restaurant. There is nitrous that's helping in the propellant in those whipped cream crackers. But it's also used for things like combustion engines. It's been used to power supercars. I mean, there's a whole litany of uses that go beyond just ingesting it. But the recreational use and abuse, you usually see it as an inhalant from balloons or canisters. We're going to get into why balloons, but there's some specific reasons that users over time decided to use balloons as opposed to straight out of canisters. And it's very easily accessible. It's legal, like we said, for those industrial and culinary purposes, but just as easily accessible buying them in smoke shops. So a little bit about the history of nitrous. There's going to be a lot of funny paintings that I'm putting into this presentation because, as you can see, parties using nitrous or laughing gas have been going hundreds of years back. They're literally called laughing gas parties, and this is kind of what they looked like. There were people who would, usually like upper crust or high society people, would get together and use nitrous at parties. This was a common thing back then as we were still trying to figure out what the substance was and what the chemical was doing. So using nitrous at parties, nothing new. Uh, first, first discovered back in 1772. So we're talking a few hundred years now that we've been experimenting with and on ourselves and others with nitrous. It was discovered by an English chemist named Joseph Priestley. He first identified it as dephlogisticated nitrous air, which is very, very catchy name. I'm surprised it didn't catch on, but yeah, that's what it was referred to as back then. The guy on the right is a gentleman named Humphrey Davy. So Davy was a British chemist, and he was one of the pioneers of nitrous research. And like any good scientific pioneer, he was using nitrous on himself and others. He was the one that actually coined the term laughing gas and was kind of the first one to note those analgesic, those pain relieving properties, but really focused more on recreational effects as he was kind of getting into these experiments on himself. So he was kind of exploring the physiological action of different gases. This is kind of how he stumbled upon this. Once he had discovered nitrous oxide proper, again, he was testing this on himself and his friends. So he would get his buddies together, they would ingest different types of gases and then note the effects. And this is how they kind of stumbled upon the pleasurable effects of nitrous oxide. So again, this is less early on about scientific ways to utilize nitrous, but this was more looking at, hey, this feels good. Let's look more into this. And so he had attempted to use nitrous in combination with wine to create a hangover cure. So this is kind of where his mind was at as they were doing these experiments, is just to kind of cure hangovers with wine, by the way, to varying degrees of success. He did note that the gas might be useful for surgical and dental operations. So it was kind of in the back of the mind, even if this wasn't the initial reason why we were doing research into nitrous. But we were making note that those applications might be useful. So the anesthetic portion part, it was not regularly used in medicine until decades after he died. So, late 1700s, we're messing around, we're finding out that it makes us feel good. But there really wasn't a whole lot of forward progress in the scientific portion until, years and years after Humphrey Davy had passed away. So early recreational use. Now, again, I mentioned some of those paintings. If you look over there on the right, there are several depictions of some of those laughing gas parties. As you can see, those people are having the time of their lives. At those, I see a fainting couch. I mean, times were different, but people were still getting together to try and get inebriated off of different things. So nitrous becomes popular at these laughing gas parties in the early 19th century. Um, these events, like I said, kind of upper crust. They were hosted by scientists, physicians, and then just general members of the public, members of the press. They would come and document these things. So the guests were inhaling the gas, specifically for its euphoric and hallucinatory effects. It was kind of viewed as a harmless novelty at the time. Um, just a trend, another trend that was probably in their minds passing. It wasn't something that was going to be sticking around for a long time. So kind of just looked at it as a novelty. Um, when we're talking about the euphoric and hallucinatory effects, I am going to give a brief description of what those euphoric and hallucinatory effects are like. Um, I'm going to tell a quick anecdote. So, prior to coming back out here to the suburbs, I lived in the city for about 12, 13 years. And at the end, I lived in a neighborhood called Humboldt Park. The three guys who lived above me in the apartment above me, did not work. They were DJs. All three of them were DJs to some different varying degrees of success. But what they would do is throw rent parties. So at these rent parties, they would charge $5 at the door. You could get in. It would basically pay for their rent for the month. But these guys knew, like I think, an unscrupulous dentist. So this was the way that they were getting nitrous oxide. And if you've ever taken it, it's situations or parties like this, you would get it like in a balloon. When you consume it, it kind of would give me like a tunnel vision, and then the audio usually like, paired with like bass heavy music, you would kind of get this wobbly, kind of hard to describe audio effect happening at the same time. And the effect is very, very short. It's a very short acting substance. And we're going to talk why that can be problematic in a little bit, but that's basically the type of feeling that you can get by using nitrous. The hallucinatory aspects can kick in if you're using it over prolonged periods of time, but that euphoria can definitely happen with smaller doses. So the actual medical application. So nitrous is first actually used as an anesthetic drug by a dentist. So there was a dentist named Horace Wells, that's our friend over here on the right. He had attended a public demonstration of nitrous in Connecticut in 1844. So in addition to these laughing gas parties, there were also scientists who would come out and kind of do public demonstrations of these substances as we were finding them and kind of showing them off. So he went to this demonstration and he saw a volunteer who was suffering from chronic leg pain go up in front of everybody and inhale nitrous oxide from the scientist who was doing the demonstration. And this chronic leg pain that this person was suffering from, he was able to kind of move freely without those pains. And so, Wells is sitting in the audience. He kind of has this idea that, okay, well, there's some kind of analgesic properties when people are ingesting nitrous. And this is important for him because, as you said, he was a dentist. And if you know anything about early dentistry, it did not involve a lot of very I'll say successful anesthesia. You were probably lucky if you could get some liquor down, and then people could hold you down as they extracted teeth and things like that. So he was looking for new ways to be able to provide analgesic properties for his dental patients. So again, these early scientists, these psychonauts, they will often conduct trials on themselves, and this is what he did. So he inhaled the nitrous, and as it starts to kick in, he had a colleague extract his tooth. There was still pain involved, but it was nowhere near the pain that was present in these dentist practices prior to this type of analgesia. So obviously the dollar signs went off, and he realized this could be a very, very important thing for the dental practice. Not a very pleasant picture, but as you can see, this was the ways that they used to have to get anesthesia in people. And this is kind of just a woodcut painting of a dental patient taking that nitrous as anesthesia. So as it starts to advance in the 1860s, we do see kind of that wider adoption in both dentistry, but also minor surgery. So it's not strong enough to be used in major surgeries. So back then, that was usually either things like ether or chloroform, which are sort of these nasty liquids that people would put on handkerchiefs and then have to inhale, and this would basically knock people out. Ether and chloroform obviously have their side effects, so they were looking for, different types of things they could use as analgesia. They would combine it with oxygen, and this is actually still practiced today for a safer route of administration. Joseph Thomas Clover is a gentleman who's just comes up as a blip on this timeline, but he was the one that actually invented the inhaler for surgical operations back in the late 1870s. Um, the thing, though, to keep note of is as this starts to popularize and as we start to see nitrous used in these types of practices, there's always going to be adoption by medical quacks. So back in the day, there was all types of snake oil cures being promised. with nitrous specifically for cures for consumption, scrofula, which was kind of like a type of TB for the lymph nodes, but also other types of diseases for the blood, throat, and lungs. So in addition to being a helpful substance, it was also being peddled as one of these cure-alls for these other ailments that people have. As far as modern medical usage, it's obviously still widely used. Dentistry and obstetrics, specifically for pain relief. It is administered in those very, very highly controlled doses in combination with oxygen. It is largely recognized as one of the more safer and effective anesthetics. And another interesting thing that I found is that low doses of nitrous can also be looked at as an effective anxiolytic, so kind of an anti-anxiety type of substance, though it's not practical enough or safe enough to be prescribed in any type of regular capacity for that. So off-label had some great use for anti-anxiety medication. As far as the other uses these days, you may have seen this logo over to the side, NOS. This is not only used as an addition in propulsion systems, you may have seen it in an energy drink, kind of a wide range of services the NOS people have there. But it is an oxidizer in propulsion systems. So nitrous is stored as a compression liquid, usually in these canisters over here on the right, which then increases airflow, which can help increase speed. So it assists in combustion. This was originally used by the German Luftwaffe planes back in World War II, but small amounts of sulfur are added to this version of nitrous to prevent substance abuse. Because, of course, addicts will find a way to try to use substances, and so they needed to add sulfur to make sure people weren't abusing this specific type of nitrous. Also, the culinary use. This is where you see a lot of it these days. If you look over to the right, that is what we call whippets. That was called the slang that we had growing up for those things. You can see at the bottom those type of small, we call those crackers, but those small whipped cream canisters. Those are the things that are added to those, like I said, kind of restaurant grade whipped cream dispensers, and it helps to basically keep it kind of in a more whipped shape as opposed to running out liquidy or curdled. But it is used as that propellant. Other gases like oxygen and CO2, which usually can't be used because that can over oxidize and curdle the whipped cream. So this is the reason why they use nitrous in the first place. But this form of nitrous is obviously very easily abused. So it's one of those things like other inhalants that addicts over time found different ways to use these types of things. So spawn, the common slang for nitrous, which you might hear is whippets, some form of whippets. And I challenge you, the next time you're out, look down on the ground where you're walking. You may see a few of these littered on the ground. I see these all the time out here in DuPage. It doesn't really matter what city I'm in. So keep an eye on the ground next time you're out. So we talked about the history, but let's talk about what it actually does to us. So when we are taking nitrous, or we're using, misusing, however you want to talk about it, what does it do to the brain? So it's going to have that rapid onset. So I mentioned that rapid onset earlier with a very short duration of effects. One of the other colloquialisms that I've heard nitrous called is hippie crack. That's been used for since time immemorial. And the reason they call it that is because, like crack, it has a very rapid onset with a very short duration of effects. And nitrous oxide for a while was used out in the festival scene, and it still is. So a lot of hippies using nitrous, and it has that short duration of effects like crack cocaine, hence hippie crack. So because of the short duration of effects, you do see people tend to binge use this. People who use it for hours at a time, sometimes longer, kind of creates that binge mentality with it. But it's going to alter the neurotransmitter activity in the brain, especially the GABA and MDMA receptors. So the GABA is what regulates anxiety, stress, and sleep functions by slowing down brain activity. And MDMA is the key mechanism which helps our brain with learning and memory formation. So you can see why that can become an issue over time. Obviously, it's sending your GABA receptors into overdrive, but also it's affecting those MDMA. So those learning short-term memory formations, it could be problematic over time. It does cause that euphoria, which is obviously one of the main reasons people use it, but also that dissociation, and as we said, can cause hallucinations over time. It can also lead to oxygen deprivation, which, of course, over time can affect brain function in a long-term capacity. The short-term effects on the body, mostly just dizziness, obviously some lightheadedness, and impaired coordination. That was one of the big ones I found back in the day when I was using nitrous. It can cause nausea and vomiting, obviously some increased heart rate and blood pressure, and then just kind of some possible headaches and confusion. You can kind of see in the photos that I'm using the different ways that people are using or ingesting nitrous. As I said, kind of in the festival scene, you'll see a lot of people walking around with balloons, and 9 times out of 10, that's what they have in that balloon is nitrous oxide. The reason that they use it out of balloons as opposed to maybe taking a hit straight off of a canister is usually due to the way that they're storing the nitrous in some of these canisters. So oftentimes it might have Freon or other things in it to where extended use, taking something straight out of a canister can actually cause frostbite. So you do see people using it out of balloons like that. The longer term effects on the brain, one of the biggest ones we see is vitamin B12 depletion. That can lead over time to both nerve and brain damage. Obviously, those memory problems, we talked about those MDMAs, but also that cognitive impairment. It's kind of just shooting holes in your brain over a long period of time. And obviously, a risk of psychological dependence. I'm going to talk a little bit about it when we get into treatment modalities. The actual physical withdrawals, the physical dependence is not as high as some other substances. However, there's a pretty high risk of psychological dependence. So even once you're kind of past, once you're out of the woods physically, you're still going to have that high risk of psychological dependence long term. The long-term effects on the body, one of them is nerve damage. So you're even looking at things like neuropathy. So that kind of weakness, numbness, pain from nerve damage. So usually in the extremities. So that kind of permanent pins and needles, that's actually something that can happen long term as you're using that stuff. But another one's weakened immune system. So long-term nitrous use does seem to sap our body from some of these like essential vitamins and other things like that B12, which really just wrecks your immune system. So if you're somebody that already has, you're somebody who might be immunocompromised, this can actually make it even worse. Uh, Over time. And then obviously increased risk of accidents and injuries. I saw a news story recently in DuPage. I forget exactly which city it was in, but there was a head-on collision that was caused because the driver was using nitrous as he was driving and had one of these dissociative moments and jumped a lane of traffic. And luckily, nobody was killed. But this is something that you're starting to see as it becomes more and more popular and easily accessible. And that's a really, really important thing to hit home is the easily accessible part. Some of those other risks of nitrous misuse. So like we said, the lack of oxygen over time, that's that acute thing, right? The unconsciousness or death, obviously, but that frostbite. So, inhaling directly from the canisters can cause frostbite on the extremities, cause frostbite on the mouth, and obviously cause lung damage. If you look over there to the right, that is just a smattering of some of the types of consumer grade nitrous you can find at any vape shop. They're kind of these larger canisters, and you will see them on the ground all over the place. So if you see one moving forward, you can say, "Oh, hey, that was from that presentation." Because yes, this is the way that people are buying them now. Obviously, an increased risk when combined with other substances. So if you're already taking something like alcohol, sedatives, even opiates, other central nervous system depressants, this can obviously increase the risk if you're doing polypharma like that. So important to take note. Some signs of chronic use. I'm going to say the last thing on this slide first. Note, this cannot be detected on routine drug screens. I'm going to say routine there, because due to the miracles of modern science, you can test for most things, even if it's like on a send out urinary analysis. But your average 5 panel, obviously, even 12 panel, you're not going to be able to test for this particular substance. In fact, usually the way that people, if they don't self-report as using nitrous, the way that medical facilities have to find out is usually by doing extended blood tests and like looking for that B12 depletion and some of those other markers, which are the signs of chronic use. But again, that numbness or that pins and needles that it kind of come in and don't leave, that neuropathy that is one of the major signs of chronic nitrous use, but also mood swings, anxiety, depression, that kind of unsteady walk. Some of these other things we see with long-term inhalant abuse, persistent fatigue and weakness, tinnitus, so that constant ringing in the ears. This is actually something you can develop from chronic nitrous use. And then memory loss and psychosis, and then if used during pregnancy, can lead to some birth defects if you're using during pregnancy. So why is this so popular lately? Number of reasons, but the main one is the Galaxy Gas trend. You can show digital hands. Has anyone here heard of Galaxy Gas prior to this presentation? Okay. So I see a few hands. Yes. Okay. So this has been all over the place lately. This kind of, like we said, showed up on our radar last year, when we were kind of looking into that initial vape shop presentation of like the different types of substances that people can buy, and nitrous is one of those. Um, since that presentation, which I think was maybe almost fully a year ago, Galaxy Gas has exploded. So Galaxy S is actually, like I said, it's a specific brand of nitrous, but you may hear Galaxy S as kind of a catch-all for these different types of brands, but it's kind of the same thing. Very popular among young adults on social media, including rappers. That's actually how it got on my radar specifically, was there were rappers specifically, I want to say in like Atlanta or in the South, where they started showing these off in music videos. So this kind of became a trend as kids started to see these videos, but also in social media, and the popularity of this stuff took off. So this is used almost exclusively recreationally. You can see on the boxes, or if you were to look on the small print of these things, it is marketed as culinary use only. This is a similar thing that happened in smoke shops, probably going back to the 60s or 70s, where, they're not technically allowed to sell, bongs and other glass pieces for the use of marijuana, so they have to say, for tobacco use only. Okay, we all know damn well that people aren't using those to smoke tobacco, and this is a similar situation with this. There is legit culinary use for these things. I don't want to get it twisted, but that's not what it's being used for. So this is used almost exclusively recreationally. So this and other brands are sold online and at vape shops. So the social media influence has been huge. Viral videos showing just kind of the casual use of Galaxy Gas, specifically on Instagram and TikTok. Those seem to be the two major social media sites that Galaxy Gas has taken over from. Easy availability, like we said, you can pretty much walk in and pick these up at any smoke shop as long as you're 18. Flavored options. We've seen this before. When we've seen the marketing of these substances with these fruit flavors towards a younger demographic. So we saw that with Alka Pops, which are those kind of malt liquor beverages that look like sodas, right? We see it in the gummies. So for things like originally it was CBD gummies, but now it's THC gummies, and candies and things that it's made into, and also vapes. I mean, that's what was very, very dangerous about vapes, was it was marketing as these fruit flavors. This is what Galaxy Gas is doing. And not only Galaxy Gas, but the other brands on the market doing something very, very similar. Um, there's also misconceptions, right? It's seen as a safer alternative, or a safer high, mostly due to its short-term effects. So, kids are using it. They say, well, this only lasts a very short time. I'm not using it chronically. So it's kind of looked at as a safer option, which is obviously a misconception. Now, I'm going to play a very, very short video. This is about 2 minutes long. The reason I wanted to play this video specifically is to illustrate a specific situation. So, when we're looking at these substances, this should not be looked at as something that's only in our area, in rich areas, in areas in the South, like I said, where there's the rap community was using it. This video is from Billings, Montana. So, middle of Montana. Sometimes we think that those states might get things a little bit slower than we get them. But I wanted to play this to kind of illustrate that this problem is happening all over the place. So I'm going to play this video. Like I said, it's only about 2 minutes.
One of these products came from a cooking store, and one of these products came from a vape store, but they're both the same thing.
You can't hear the audio.
That's
Can't hear the audio? Okay, hang on 1 second. Sorry about that. I'm going to reshare by hitting this. And we're back. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks for noting that, Christy. I appreciate it.
One of these products came from a cooking store, and one of these products came from a vape store, but they're both the same thing, nitrous oxide, a chemical compound that when inhaled gives a high sensation. And as products like Galaxy Gas are becoming more and more popular, they're also becoming more accessible. It's the first thing you see on the Galaxy Gas website, a disclaimer saying this product is for culinary food use only.
Its intended use is for either making whipped cream or culinary foams in the kitchen.
That's exactly what Marguerite Jodry, co-owner of Zest Kitchen and Cookware, sells the nitrous oxide canisters for. But she's had younger generations try to buy the product, likely for the purpose of getting high.
Yeah, but we're just kind of careful in general about making sure that you're 18 when you buy them.
Whereas most recreational drugs are sold to those 21 and older, you have to be 18 to buy Galaxy Gas and other nitrous oxide products. And they're readily available all across town. We checked 406 Vapes, Clouds Vapes, B-Town Vapes, and Moe's Smoke Shop in Billings, all selling Galaxy Gas.
This is clearly marketed at high schoolers, which is a different thing. There is no legitimate reason to have that marketed at all to the wider public.
Joe Olson is a Billings parent. This was his first time learning about nitrous oxide and found it unusual that teenagers could buy the product.
Yeah, it can be abused so easily that I would think we would have to raise the age.
But that age is seemingly the target audience. If you search Galaxy Gas on the popular social media app TikTok, you'll find all kinds of videos of mostly young people using the product as a quick fix to get high, even posting reviews and how-tos. According to the CDC, abusing the drug can be quite dangerous. The CDC says that an overuse of the drug can lead to serious lung issues, suffocation, and even death. But TikTok knows the dangers. The site now prompts users to resources and helplines for substance abuse when they search for it. In Billings, Matt Carmack, MTN News. One of these products came from a cooking store.
So as you can see, they up in Montana are having very similar issue. You saw her scrolling through TikTok and you could see reviews. I found that as well when I was looking through it. People are actually doing like little mini reviews on their pages, which is interesting. But the other one, like we said, social media influence, there's, people are using it on podcasts. I've got a few screenshots from different videos that I pulled up. Kanye West recently in the news for any number of idiotic things, and there's suspected nitrous use on his part too, but it's all over the place. If you search Galaxy Gas on any social media site you go onto, it's all over the place. So what we're kind of seeing when you go through there is the kind of normalization, but the glamorization of the nitrous use. So, and it's encouraging the binge use due to the shorter acting substance, but leading to that higher risk of harm. The accessibility has just been increased, but also the demand, particularly among those teens and young adults. So I went into three area vape shops out here in DuPage, kind of at random, to kind of do a little bit of a test to see what was out there. And so I chose three different suburbs, suburbs a little bit different from each other, to check that out. So it was in Villa Park, Addison, Naperville. All three vape shops I went into, yes, they sell a wide range of nitrous products, and a majority say yes, their consumer base is 18 to 21 years old. I did ask if they were getting, a lot of return customers, and the shop here in Addison was very forthcoming with me, and they said that yes, it is repeat customers, it's daily repeat customers, and sometimes multiple times a day. So we are seeing that binge use does show up in the demand. This was also from my field trips. These are just three photos from a single parking lot. As you can see, discarded nitrous boxes, discarded canisters. They were all over the place out there. So this is definitely something that's being bought frequently. Okay, so we know the history, know what it does. Treatment approaches. What are some modalities? What are some ways we can look into treating someone who's been chronic using of nitrous? Obviously, there can be a need occasionally for detox and medical supervision, but like we said, it's not physically as bad as some of the other substances. So medical detox may only take a day or so, maybe 2 or 3. But addressing the possible withdrawal symptoms, mostly going to be that kind of fatigue, headaches, some of that confusion, the disassociation that can linger after the use of an inhalant. Inpatient, obviously, and/or outpatient treatment. CBT, I was reading a couple of studies about CBT has been pretty successful in the treatment of not only nitrous, but other inhalants, obviously in identifying triggers, but also working with coping mechanisms. Recovery programs, obviously we know, the big ones, 12 steps, SMART, Refuge, Celebrate. I think nutritional support, and sort of doing things to repair the body are just as helpful because of all that vitamin depletion, specifically B12. So building some of those things back up naturally in the body over time, because it was just sapped. Your body's basically sapped of those substances over time. Prevention strategies, obviously school-based programs, integration of the education and curriculums. I haven't seen, at least in the schools that we've talked to, too much of this nitrous misuse yet in their student population. But like I said, it's almost been like an acceleration over the past few months. So I would be interested to see how that has changed, especially in high schools and people who are kind of closer to the age of 18. Community awareness campaigns, just utilization of social media. I think that's going to be a big one because of how prevalent the use of it is on social media. I think being able to utilize some harm reduction strategies, some education strategies through social media is just as important. And then obviously things like peer education, like training our youth leaders to kind of understand that, hey, this is a trend that's happening. And how to kind of educate their peers on making different choices. But I want to really hit on parental guidance. I think this is just another in an issue of needing those kind of open, judgment-free talks and communication about the risk of nitrous misuse. I think in the work that the ROSC does, and we've gone out and done prevention education work, I always try to say this. We're pretty pragmatic. We're realistic about, what kids are like. When I was in high school, it was the DARE program, which spoiler alert, did not work, at least for me. So when we go in and do these types of, presentations, and when we're doing prevention stuff at schools, we got to be able to stress that it's not just say no, it's hey, this is out there, but this is what can happen if you go down that path for too long. Obviously, policy and regulatory measures, I was going to say these should not be an easy replacement for better prevention education strategies. I think, the enforcement of age verification laws is the biggest thing for the vape shops, but also advocacy for stricter online sales. I think right now you could probably go on any number of websites, especially culinary ones, and buy some of these items, especially like the smaller whipped cream cracker versions. So advocacy for stricter online sales and regulations. Possible restriction of sales. I never see it going that far, but that is also we're at the mercy of local governance and local laws. So again, regulatory measures, not an easy fix. Let's try to work on better prevention, education, and harm reduction strategies first. So that is all I've got. We do have a few minutes left. If there are any questions or comments, or, if you're somebody who, like us, we're out there in the field, if this is something that anybody is seeing kind of in their area, I think this is a good time to kind of share notes and share some information. So yeah, I see Christy's hand up. Christy.
Hi there. I'm Christy. I'm with New Directions, and we're in Crystal Lake. And we have the Away Out hotline out here, which is a resource hotline for people to call that would like to be connected to recovery. We're also in the local hospitals assisting participants that come in that, they'll be asked if they want to talk to a peer recovery specialist. And if they say yes, they talk to us. So we get a lot of phone calls, and the trends come in usually with our team first in the county. And we've had a couple calls in just the past 2 months. We've had 2 calls, 26-year-old and a 32-year-old. One unhoused, one just younger. They both seem really young in a young group of people. So I just thought I'd share that for whatever it's worth.
No, that's very, very helpful. Thank you, Christy. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Who was up next? Scott, did you have your hand up? Or was it Sarah? Okay, there we go. Sarah?
Hi, Jarrett. First of all, thank you. This was super informative. I joined this because I work for Omni Youth Services, and we do Too Good for Drugs and other education in like middle schools and high schools. And basically, since they came back from winter break, we've like seen an uptick for sure. I've seen them in some high school parking lots. So they're definitely on the rise, which is why I wanted to hear more about it. So I really appreciate it. My question, you mentioned that when you were at a vape shop in Addison, that they mentioned that some people come back like multiple times in one day. Is that because there's like a limit in how much you can buy in one go, or do you know why that
So
is?
when I talked to that proprietor, he didn't mention a limit or anything.
Okay.
I think, and I don't want to try to predict the mindset of the gentleman who was coming back, but I think sometimes when people are kind of locked into chronic use like that, they may start with smaller amounts and say, "Oh, I'm only going to use this today," and then
Yeah.
maybe go through it really quickly, and then they are back there again later in the day. I did when I was talking to him about the return customers, he did kind of say that it was one of those things because it's new, or newer with those repeat customers. He still doesn't even know how to feel about, do we cut somebody off at a certain point, and I think that's largely due to not enough education for the owners of these shops as well. I've talked to that particular proprietor about other substances that they stopped selling, which I think T and Neptune was one of them. So there's things that do get sold and proprietors, learn more about and stop selling, but I think we're still in the somewhat new phase right now.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be shocked to see maybe some changes in the next few months.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Scott, were you next?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jarrett. Sarah asked pretty similar to what I was going to ask, which was really, it's all super eye-opening, and that kind of up to the proprietor, like up to them to kind of set limits. Do you know anything about any plans for legislations or like best practices? And then I have an unrelated to the presentation question after everybody gets a chance to talk.
Okay, no problem. I'll loop back to you. I don't know of any legislation on the books. I think you know how this goes. Usually legislation will get a fire lit under it if there's, deaths that happen because of a substance, or, major accidents and things of that nature. So, I don't know a whole lot of that yet, and if that is something that's happening in our county specifically. So again, you know, it's unfortunate because it's like these guys probably look at it like free market, like there's a demand, so we're going to sell it. So again, it does seem like it's one of those substances where it's down to the proprietor. It's down to that particular shop to set their own regulation unless it's a local governance. And then Mrs. K, you have your hand up next.
I believe Judith might have been before me. Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Chandler. I work with the Cook County Sheriff's Office with the SMART program, specifically with reentry. My question, because this is such, it's not really like you say a newer thing, but because it's a trend that's coming back, resurfacing, are we aware of any organizations that are running like workshops to educate people on how to like train people to be aware of the signs of abuse, or anyone that's running workshops on like trauma groups for this or recovery based on this, or geared towards children who are suffering with this issue? Are we aware of anything of that nature at this time?
So specifically for this, at least in DuPage, I'm not aware of anything. I think the way that we've been treating it and kind of suggesting to others too is to the closest thing we can compare it to is like other inhalants. So, you know, if someone has inhalant abuse, so is there somebody who's unmuted? Okay, sorry. Looking at like treating it like other inhalants. So, you know, any number of treatment centers can kind of treat that specific substance, but as this is new, that's the reason why like I wanted to do this presentation is because I wasn't seeing others like this out there. As far as like workshops and things like that, I don't know if anybody who's on the call has one. They can, you know, obviously chip in. But like I said, because it's new, we're still kind of creating these presentations because the need's been arising. Judith, did you have
Somebody
something?
put something in the chat. Thank you for that.
Yeah, if somebody else has one, we can try to get that in the chat. So thank you.
You.
All right. Judith, did you want to go next? Oh, I think she's talking to somebody. Okay.
I work with 3 screens, so trying to get my cursor on the correct screen to unmute is sometimes a challenge.
I get it.
So I'm DuPage County Coroner, Judith Lucas, and so I actually have 3 things. I was unable to hop on at 10, so I came a little bit late. So I appreciate this, Jarrett. Is there a recording of this for me to review later?
Yes, I recorded it and I can share the slides with whoever would like them as well.
Okay. And then another thing concerns me because we do tox tests, you know, on decedents. So if you're saying this isn't showing up in a normal toxicology, I'm wondering how many, unless we suspect this, you know, that sometimes there's drug paraphernalia right there, but unless we suspect it, we may be missing some of these. So that's more of a comment. And I don't know if there's going to be any kind of lab tests, you know, improvements down the road, you know, that in the toxicology field, that they'd be able to test that. That's more of a comment, you know, it's a concern of mine. And then also from Miss KCCSO, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I kind of, you know, feeding off of what you had said a number of years ago, and this is, you know, well before I was coroner, I was walking down a residential street and there was a car parked on the street and the door opened. And as soon as the door opened, I could smell the inhalant. So I was like, and, you know, and the reaction of the people in the car as they were getting out, I knew that they had been inhaling some substances. So this kind of goes off of the last inquiry. Are there signs that we can, you know, teach the public and everything? How do we identify that? You know, is there going to be an odor? You know, what other than behavior, you know, are there actually like I said, like a sign of an odor or something that would maybe, you know, kind of you know, tickle someone to look into it?
So, thank you for all of that. And let me do the comment you made first. And Blake, you're on here too. When talking about like maybe signs that someone's been using in terms of a tox screen. Like I said, so when I talk about you can't see it on a routine tox screen. So as I said at the time, it's usually like those, 5-panel up to 12-panel. They're not going to be able to touch some of those things.
Okay.
There is some, but usually cost, send off because it's very specific markers that you're looking for. And then the one I kept talking about was B12 depletion was like one of the major markers that they would see. Blake, I don't know if you know differently about any types of particulars. If you do, cool. If not, but I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Blake.
Not specifically due to the due to the incredibly short half-life of it. It's one of the more tricky substances to try and test for. A lot of times you're not testing directly for it, but more evidence of its use by things like the lack of B12. There might be some more specific tests that have come out recently due to the prevalence of it now, but it's a very tricky thing to try and test for because your body will process it so quickly.
Okay. And, I'll run that by my pathologist, but even, if we do any kind of tox screening and for some reason they're not able to test it, we are not going to put down suspected. So, maybe they can do the B12 and that could be written up in the report, but that wouldn't show on the death certificate specifically. So it wouldn't necessarily be reported, because I know that there's a lot of information they take from the death certificates. And so that could be something that would be missed on the death certificate because we're only going to put definitive things. But I will discuss that with my forensic pathologist and see what she has to say on that.
Yeah, and I think when I was doing some research for this, um, in large part, any type of deaths that occur, it's usually because of polypharma. So they're
Right.
using another CNS depressant on top of this, and so that's a lot of times what causes the death. So again, great questions though. And as I said to some previous comments, like we're still kind of in the wilderness as we kind of make our way through this trend. This is nothing new, but just the accessibility is what's the new piece to it. When back in the day when we were going to parties, you had to know like somebody who knew a dentist who would sell you a canister. Like there were ways to get it. Now you can just go to a vape shop and get it. So that's the danger and the trend that we're seeing right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, listen, I appreciate everybody making it out to this. This will be up on our YouTube page a little bit later. And then I will be happy to share the recording and the slides with anybody that wants it. Yeah, happy to try and help as like we said, as we see more and more of this stuff, kind of make our way through this trend together. And let's keep in mind that, prevention and harm reduction, that's the work we do. This is never meant to be scare tactic, just a honest look at what we're seeing in our area. So thank you to everybody. And yeah, next month, come back for Ibogaine 101 and how it's used in the recovery process. So look forward to seeing y'all next month.
Thank you. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank
you
you.
so
Bye, y'all.
much.
Thanks, Jarrett.
Bye, y'all.